Welcome back to the 1950s. For our final little episode of this week, we are going to take a look at what I am sort of generically referring to as the atomic 50s. This is the furniture, the fashion trends, the home design that we think of when we think of the 1950s, the iconic items, the items that stand out to us, the space age, splashy starburst patterns, the sleek furniture, the Danish Modern, the things that were out there and were probably in most homes, but were not part of mainstream decor, but definitely worth their own little episode in this trip backward through time. So stay tuned and we'll get right to it. Well, back in the 50s and early 60s, we had, as a culture, a love-hate relationship with the space age. On one hand, it provided us with incredible technological advances, just huge leaps in computer technology, along with things like aluminum foil, which came out of the space program. And boy, you can cook your roast in it. You can wrap your sandwich in it. In my family, you could make hats to put on your head and keep the birds from stealing your sense of direction. But I don't think my family was typical. We as a culture just benefited tremendously from this, but it was coupled with the space race, the Cold War, and we had a lot of anxiety about it too. Hollywood was telling us that while we were getting aluminum foil to wrap up our sandwiches or protect us from the birds, that there was a possibility that Martians were going to come visit us in a very unfriendly way, or that the nuclear testing, well, atomic testing in those days, was going to irradiate household pests and we'd be plagued by 50-foot ants trying to kill us. And this sort of cultural anxiety we had over it has been the subject of numerous academic dissertations. This is something people have given serious study. So when I start saying that this is the atomic 50s, I am referring to the design elements. And not all of these are atomic. It's just I'm using that as an umbrella for the cutting edge designs that were around in the 1950s. Most of these design elements did not last. They were well, I hate to say flash in the pan, because they were a little more than that, but they did not transfer through to the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the way mainstream furniture at that time did. So let's just get right into it and start taking a look at some pictures, because this is going to be a pretty picture-intensive video. Seating furniture, chairs, sofas. Let's take a look at that. And when we look at the pictures, notice the sleek George Jetson sort of designs they had. And one of them in particular, and pay attention to this, it's the blue and white chair and ottoman set, actually has that atomic print on it. So here you go. In some ways, that furniture doesn't look all that too terribly different from everything else that was around. But the sleek lines didn't last. We went back to boxier, more substantial looking furniture very quickly. One thing I do hope you noticed is legs. For some reason, in the 50s, we were very eager to show off the legs of our furniture. I don't know why. I guess, well, we have the technology to create legs on furniture, and we wanted to make sure everybody knew it. It was a design thing, those sleek little tapered legs, usually with little brass caps on the bottom. And sometimes they were these bent wire legs, and we'll see that more later when we look at tables. But just note the legs. That was a big thing in the 50s. In the 40s, they were covered with skirts. In the 60s and 70s, they were covered with skirts. In the 80s and 90s, they were just little blocks. Legs had pretty much disappeared from sofas and easy chairs. The next thing we want to take a look at is desks, consoles, vanities, because these are some pretty wild and outlandish designs. And the reason people could get away with that was because a console was not part of your overall living room furniture. A desk was not part of your overall bedroom furniture. Some of these, in fact, I think were more vanities than desks. They could come, they could go. So, and also they were smaller and therefore less expensive to purchase. So we saw a lot of sort of cutting edge design in these things. So take a look. Yes, some of those are just way out there. And yes, the photobomb kitty is back. He can't quite get into the screen yet, but he'll make it. These were pieces that could be added or subtracted to a room very easily. When styles changed, they could be moved out. Yes, I know. Yes, we are back. Yes, yeah, I know. They can see your ears. Don't worry, you'll get your tail in the picture. I know you will. So that was one of the things that made them so susceptible to the quick changes that were coming up. Also, as part of a standard living room grouping, even in the 50s when they were changing from a two-piece grouping, we discussed that, sofa matching chair, or sometimes sectional matching chair. These were not part of that, so they could be added more easily, subtracted more easily. The next thing I thought we'd look at is fabric. And this is where we do see a lot of atomic prints. And one of the things that I want to show you before we look at fabrics is, I got to move the cap. All right, say hello. Now you're going to leave. Good boy. Paisley. This is going to be our word for the day, even though I know you already know what it is. It's these little amoeba designs. And these designs have been around for hundreds of years. They originated in the Middle East, in Iran, which was Persia then, moved over into the subcontinent to India, and then made their way to Europe via mostly the Dutch East India Company. But by the 17th century, this was in Europe. So, and mind you, we're talking about the 1600s. So we are talking about, before our time as Americans. And they are amoeba shapes. Shawls like this are still readily available. This is a new shawl. This is not old. And they were a status symbol among young women in the 17th and 18th centuries because their beaux or prospective beaux would bring them back from their foreign travels. And this said, I have a beau. It said, my beau cares enough to bring me a shawl. And it said, my beau is well traveled. So young women, boy, this was the coveted item. And they transferred through. In the late 60s, Paisleys were everywhere. And you remember our previous word of the day, ubiquitous Paisleys were ubiquitous. Everybody had Paisley something or other back in the 60s. It was on the clothing. I heard one source that said the Beatles popularized it. Could be. But we got the term Paisley from Paisley in Scotland. That's a town in Scotland that was noted for their weaving. And they reproduced these designs in abundance. And eventually it became known as Paisley cloth, meaning cloth from Paisley, and eventually referred to the pattern. Now, the Paisley design, which as I say has been with us for a long time, this amorphous amoeba-like design, was sort of recreated in the 50s as a boomerang or kidney-shaped design coming from this, but just sort of reinterpreted for modern times. And notice how frequently this will show up in the patterns from the 50s. So take a look. Now, these patterns, by the way, are readily available. You can get genuine vintage 50s fabrics, and they've also been pretty heavily reproduced. So if you have your heart set on a 1950s living room or bedroom, take a look at some of the wonderful reproduction fabrics. They are not expensive, and the fastest way you can turn your bedroom, living room, study, whatever, into an iconically 50s design is to grab some of those patterns and string them on a rod as curtains, or upholster a chair or sofa, a few throw pillows even. So that's something to keep in mind. So Paisley, our word for the day. Next, let's go into one of my favorites, and this is lamps and accessories. Now, obviously lamps, because as you know, Sumi is a spin-off of Crazy Lamp Lady, so naturally we had to do lamps. But lamps are one of the areas of ordinary household objects that really came into their own in the 50s in terms of cutting-edge designs. And I've got some really, really nice ones, plus a few other accessories that, that I think might appeal to you. But it's the lamps. They were just atomic age. So let's take a look at 1950s lamps. Now, some of those, even if you don't like 50s lamps, you just look at them and say, wow, that's spectacular. And in fact, they were. Because, again, like the consoles and the desks, this was a smaller item that could easily be changed out as styles changed. And you could incorporate some haute design. Remember, haute was another one of our words, into your traditional living room and say, oh, look, we're trendy, we're modern, Sputnik. So that's one of the reasons that lamps became such an interesting decorative object. Now, there is another school of design that was very popular in the 50s, and to some extent it still is today in its new form, which is IKEA, and that's Danish Modern. It's sometimes called Scandinavian Modern, but the really strong designers were from Denmark. This was mostly case furniture, the wood furniture, bookcases, sideboards, tables, wooden chairs. Very sleek, very modern, mostly teak. Teak was the big wood for this, and if not teak, at least teak colored, which is a sort of coffee brown. So let's take a look at Danish Modern. Now, Danish Modern was very, very popular, very trendy, very elegant, very modern, very cutting-edge design. But it was expensive. It had to be imported from Denmark, and that's not cheap. So naturally, we're Americans, remember, we took that ball and we just ran it to the finish line. American companies started making furniture in the Danish modern style with their own spin. And one of these companies, one of the foremost companies, in fact, was a company called Kent Coffee, and that's Coffey. And the reason I'm giving you the spelling is because the way you identify Kent Coffee pieces is they were stamped. On the bottom, on the inside of a drawer, on the inside of a cabinet, there should be a stamp somewhere saying Kent Coffee. Let's take a look at those. And when we do, notice the Danish modern lines, but also take a look at those curves. It's as if somebody impressed one of the edges of that boomerang pattern in. So take a peek. This stuff, by the way, is still available. It's becoming trendy. It's becoming pricey. But if you can pick up a Kent Coffee piece, keep in mind that even a small end table or nightstand will go for $200 or $300. If you find them, grab them because they are good buys. And this was well-made furniture, and they hold up nicely. So Kent Coffee, something to grab. Danish Modern, again, something to grab, especially if you can find it at good prices. You will make your money back. Tables. Now, when I was talking about furniture legs, obviously a table is a big part of a piece of furniture. A leg is, I got that backwards. A leg is a big part of a piece of furniture like a table. But please note, these tables that I'm about to show you aren't that kidney design or the boomerang design. Notice how they're all essentially coming off that kidney-shaped design. Now, there was another table, I believe I only put one in, and this is the double-decker table. These were end tables that went along the sides of sofas or chairs, and they had a lower level and then a half upper level above them. Now, these were not new in the 50s, but this particular instantiation was. Tables like this, that were more traditionally styled with little aprons around the edge of the table and more traditional styling, darker woods, etc., were around in the 30s and 40s too. But the 50s took those tables, put their own spin on it, and it became very iconic of the 50s. So let's look at these little occasional tables. Okay. Now, one of the things that I found, and I did not realize this prior to my picture hunt for this video, some of the most striking and iconic 50s designs in tables were available in plant stands. These were small, and again, remember, people would move them in as accent pieces for a room that would probably largely be traditional. But these plant stands, oh my, Formica, multicolored, the little kidney and amoeba and paisley-ish designs. I was really, really surprised myself when I saw just how classically 50s some of these pieces are. And of all of the little picture sequences that I've shown you so far, I have to say this is one of my favorites. It's right up there with the lamps. Just, ooh, get a gander at these designs. Plant stands. Now, if this is something you can find it, buy it. Wow, that is mid-century modern to the extreme. Just terrific. The Formica tops made them practical. It allowed a lot of different colors to be incorporated into a piece, a little red here, a little blue on this level, and you could turn those little plant stands around and kind of configure it yourself. But as you can see, a lot of this furniture is not what we would call classically atomic. That's, as I said, that's just an umbrella I'm throwing on this because I wanted to show you the cutting edge designs. And most of this, again, did not translate into our time. They came in the 50s and early 60s, and they stayed in the 50s and early 60s. They were not around in the 70s, and the 80s, and the 90s. So that makes them a real blast from the past. And while we are on blast from the past, I'm including a link below to the Prelinger archives, and in fact, a specific section of the Prelinger archives. Now, the Prelinger archives is an internet resource of old films, and what they have is probably the world's best collection of what used to be called social hygiene films. They're now calling it social guidance films. And for those of you my age or a little older, I'm sure you will remember the films they used to show us in school. Cindy Goes to a Party. Bobby and Sally Are Going Out on a Date. Rules and Why We Need Them. How to Set a Table. Have Dinner with the Family. These are wonderful little slices of not exactly real life, but life as the social arbiters thought it ought to be, because these films were primarily educational, primarily designed as, frankly, indoctrination for small children to show them how to behave and also how not to have sex. That was one of the big themes in the films designed for older children. We are going to tell you how not to have sex. So I've got that link for you because I love it. And whenever I have a few minutes, I will just scoot over to the Prelinger archives, pull up the social guidance films and take a look at them and just, my goodness, because this tells us how we were raised. As adults, we can look back on this and see the value system that the adults who were making the films and teaching the classrooms and raising the children, this is the value system they were hoping to impart to us. And then the 60s came. What a disappointment we must have been to all of them. All we could do is protest in the streets, break the rules, and smoke dope. My goodness, they must have really felt like failures. But I thought you might enjoy it, so I'm including that link. Now, we are hopefully going to get out of here in less than half an hour today. So let's do a little bit of housekeeping business. One, the winner of our elephant pendant, that was the one that was announced on the boho video. I've gotten in touch with her. She's gotten in touch with me. We are going to connect. She is going to get her elephant. So well done. And that elephant was made by Karen Hopper, who is our jewelry repurposer. And she had donated that and several other pieces. But I do want to show you this because this was one of Karen's pieces, and this is the one I am keeping. You may have already seen this because I've worn this in a couple of Crazy Lamp Lady videos. I just fell in love and said, sorry, it's not going anywhere. She made this by attaching those old large rhinestone clip-on earrings to these little gold tone discs, and voila, bracelet, mine. But I'm sharing the rest. So the heart, the beautiful rose quartz heart, was not claimed by the original winner, I'm very sorry to say. So I've chosen a second winner, and that is the Italian teacher. And we have already connected, so I'm just waiting for an address. That'll go out. So congratulations to the Italian teacher. And the winner of the compact is Flowing Brook 1. And that's Brook with an E, like a person's name, rather than just, the trickling brook. So Flowing Brook 1, if you didn't get my note responding to your comment, now you know, get in touch. I will put that name down below as our winner so that I hope it's a she. I would hate to think a man's going to run around with that compact. Oh, actually, that's so sexist. All right, fine. If you are a man, wear the compact in good health. I'm sorry. That was just too sexist for words, so please forgive me. If you're a squirrel and you want that compact, fine with me too. So, Flowing Brook 1, do get in touch so I can make arrangements to get you your compact. Now, the compact, again, was made by Karen Hopper, who made the little bracelet and the elephant charm, and the rose quartz heart was Lisa from DesertDragonworks. That was one of her pieces, so I'm so glad that's finding a good home. And Kelly Williams, who had donated the beautiful Royal Hager vase, had donated a wonderful, just a delightful mid-century koi platter, Japanese gorgeous. That contest is over this week. I'm going to go in, select a winner. That'll be announced next week. So we've got all of our giveaways caught up, almost. Pen giveaways still going on. Keep in touch. Just let me know, and we'll get the pens out to you. Sock puppet giveaways still going on. You want a sock puppet, let me know. We'll get those out to you. And as usual, if you want to get in touch with me, please, please, please do it in the video comments. I read the comments. I stay on top of them for the first 24 to 48 hours. I'm right there. Subsequent videos come out and I have to stay current with them. So the best way to get in touch with me, leave a comment on the most recent video. I do go back and check comments on older videos, but at this point, we've got quite a backlog of those, so it's not as easy as it once was, although it's probably not a bad thing. Anyway, have a terrific week. When we get back together next week, we're going to be looking at 20s, 30s, 40s. We're going to go from Art Deco right up to the war era. And I'm going to include one of my favorites, not a major influence, not a major design trend, just happens to be one of my favorites. And so this is more about me sharing with you than capturing anything that was of significance. But Art Deco as it moved into the 1940s. And I may have already told you, I'm not sure. My favorite steampunk is Art Deco steampunk using the Art Deco of the 1940s. And I refer to it as Rocketeer steampunk. And also I refer to the Art Deco of the 1940s as Rocketeer Deco. So we're going to take a little bit of a look at that. Not too much time, just enough to share a little something that I find interesting. Have a fantastic week, and I will see you all next time.